Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to the Football Tribe UG channel. Robert Kesakos is your usual suspect. Welcome back to yet another live broadcast on your favorite football updates channel. It's a pleasure to be back on this beautiful Wednesday evening to join you once again for another discussion. In the morning, we had a bit of a short one because we had arrived late for broadcast, and to say that. And then I also had other engagements to get to, of course, uh, during that period. Again, we are late for reasons beyond my own control, but like I keep saying, better late than never. So we are here once again to see what's on the football front and to continue with our routine discussions. As as we speak, I'm following the events from the game between Newcastle and Fulham. Thank you, Pedri. Good evening. How are you doing, my brother? How are you doing? Hope you had a wonderful day. Um, like I was saying, I'm following up on the game between Fulham and Newcastle, and it is 1-1 at the moment. Yohan Wissa scoring on his first full debut for Newcastle in this one, while Sasa Lukic found the equalizer for Fulham there to restore parity. The game between Manchester City went into halftime with Man City leading a goal to nil. It has returned for the second half, and it is in the 48th minute. That goal scored by Ryan Cherki, a very, very brilliant goal, by the way, one that you should check out online to see for yourself. He just that ball down, dribbles past one player, and still from the outside of the 18 yards box, takes a thunderbolt of a shot to hit the back of the net. So yeah, it's been it was a beauty of a goal. Very good. How was your day in Kampala? I mean, it was a very cold morning and then a fairly hot afternoon. So, but overall, it was a very, very okay day. In as far as things went, I was a bit up and down. I'm a bit exhausted as we speak, but yeah, this broadcast has to be done as well. So that's why we are here, regardless. We are committed to doing this every single day, week in, week out, and yeah, I think our audios are good, so no worries. Um, okay. Jay from the Bay 408 says, "Do you like WWE?" I have no problem with it, but I do not like it in terms of loving it. And the reason for that is, I remember when we were growing up, every time you turned on the TV, we had a small black and white TV, and every time you turned on WWE, my auntie would say, no, those things are rough. You're going to learn how to fight and things like that. So eventually, it's not something I grew to love. I was told to not to watch it, you know. I watched Uganda Gabon. Okay, yes, Uganda did play a game against Gabon. That was an international, friendly. Their last preparation game for before the Africa Cup of Nations. You need to know how to fight in our modern world. Now, I mean. And now that you put it that way, the context is different. I mean, this what I'm talking about. You have to go back to what almost more than 2 decades ago. We're speaking in that regard or context. You know, that's more than 2 decades 2 decades ago. So really, it's um it's I don't want to say it's unfair, but those were the rules of the household. Those were the rules of the household that I was living in. So unless you and remember, for us the show was during night, so they were showing the show at night. Um, because they were showing that it at night, parents were always at home, so they could see what channel you tuned into, and then of course, Americans have guns. You don't need to learn to fight. Uh, Unless it happened during the day, then you would get the chance to, watch it. And I also remember there was a TV channel called East African TV. Every Sunday night they had they would show a movie, and still we were forbidden from watching those movies. And the excuse was, tomorrow is Monday, you have to be up early, so go and sleep. Basically that's so for things like WWE. I did not get to enjoy them, but at least I knew a couple of players or actors in there, the likes of Big Show, the likes of Hulk Hogan, I think Undertaker, of course, the John Cena's, who were just joining. Was it Batista, something like that, and a couple of others whose names I cannot quickly come off the fingertips. So yeah, that's to answer Jay. Okay, you need to know. Okay, how have you been to Ghana? No, I've never been to Ghana, but I would love to. I would love to go to Ghana and visit some of those historical sites in Ghana. There's one, I think, by the ocean or near the ocean, where you have where slaves were being kept before being transported. And we given that Ghana have had some of the popular African leaders, the likes of Kwame Nkrumah. Uganda here, you'll find a couple of things named after him, Kwame Nkrumah. So, for example, at Makerere University, there's Nkrumah Hall. So, I would love to visit Ghana for that context, and maybe have a taste of Ghanaian fufu and Ghanaian jollof rice, so to speak. Okay, do you like Baby Shark? Baby Shark? No, not really. Did you cry when Arsenal lose a? Did you cry when Arsenal lose a game? No, I've never cried when Arsenal lost a game. Isn't that? I mean, I do have the mental fortitude for it to stomach an Arsenal loss. Some have been more painful than others. That's normal, and that's the farthest it's gone. But I never beyond that. I'm coming to Kampala next week for holiday. You're most welcome. For holiday, it's going to be the capital will be very, very busy. There's a lot of movement. There's a lot of human traffic within the city. Hello, fellow human. Garang. Hi, Garang. Garang joins us once again. Good evening to you. I hope you've had a wonderful day. So guys, I cannot keep tabs on both games in terms of the live watch, but at least I'm following the events, or I'm watching live the game between Newcastle and Fulham. But for Manchester City, my other feed failed me, so I do not have access to that game. But we'll keep you updated. By the way, it's not been an easy first half for Manchester City, as despite Man City taking the lead. I thought Brentford had done really, really well, particularly in their defensive work to stay in the game. But, it's Man City. Their quality is bound to stand out, is bound to protrude. And that goal in itself by Ryan Chaki is a sheer moment of quality from a very quality player. They had another close moment through Oscar Bob before he was withdrawn for an injury and then replaced by Phil Foden. But he had a very good attempt on goal. He sort of dribbles past the player, tries to go back to the near post, but the goalkeeper had it covered. So, that was very, very impressive from Oscar Bob. I thought he could have gone for the far post, but he decided to go otherwise. James Trafford, I think there's a moment he was forced into a save. It wasn't the most uncomfortable of saves, really. It was an okay save for him, James Trafford, because it started in goal. Rekord Lewis, Kushanov, Nathan Ake, Nico O'Reilly. Although I thought Ryan Attenori would start this kind of game, but he did not even make it. Oh, sorry, Ryan Attenori, I think, has left for AFCON. Yes. Nico Gonzalez in midfield alongside Tijan Riendas, Rancheki, Savinho, Oscar Bob, who, like I said, was withdrawn for Phil Foden, and David Mukasa were the players that started for Manchester City. We spoke about this game early in the morning, and I did particularly almost 3/3 of the how we read out the anticipated team is how Pep Guardiola has fielded it. On the side of Brentford, they too made their own changes, couple of changes here and there. The likes of Hakon, Valdi Manson is in goal. You have Christoph Aja, you have Michael Kayode. This one is a regular starter. You have Sepp van de Berg. You have Nathan Collins, one of the Rico Henry. Those are starters. Vitali Janelt. Then you have Janssen. You have Yeho. You have Mikel Damsgaard, Kevin Schade, who some of these are, are regular starters for this Brentford side. Last Christmas, I gave you my heart, but the very next day, you gave it away. This year, we celebrate something special. Read comment above, please, my friend. I've read it. Last year, you were busy insinuating a proposed marriage by some colleague of ours. Was it from Indonesia or Malaysia? One of the two countries, just because he was really a big fan of the show. Ruth Natasha says, "Hello, handsome boy. How are you? I'm okay. Thanks for asking. How are you, Ruth? I hope you're doing okay. Are you from Uganda?" I don't know. The name sounds a little bit Ugandan. I know we have no monopoly to the names Ruth and Natasha, but it does sort of, ring bells within the Ugandan echelons of, naming and things like that. So, oh, yes, she says she's from Uganda. Good. It's good to have you from Uganda there. Kindly like the broadcast, but also consider subscribing to the channel while you're here. I think Ruth finds you attractive, Mr. Tribe. He called you handsome. It's a compliment. The same way we would, we pay compliments to ladies when we find them fine looking, So I take it in that spirit. Please do not try to be sarcastic in any way whatsoever, Pedri, for that matter. So today I wanted us to discuss, as we follow the events, no flirting. Okay, yes, no flirting. Okay, today I wanted us to discuss, a topic that has sort of been waiting on when you follow multiple podcasts and, talk shows, TV shows, and things like that. And I do not know. I need somebody to tell me why there is an obsession to discuss Arsenal and Arsenal players. And I'm not saying they shouldn't be discussed. Quote me right. But if it was about, let's say, media coverage in terms of balance, I think, I don't know if it's just me, but for some reason, I'm led to believe that they get like almost 50% of the discussions or topics, and the other teams share the other 50%. Of course, by the other teams, I mean, next in there, you'll have your Manchester United, you'll have your Liverpool, you'll have your Chelsea, you'll have your Manchester City, perhaps Tottenham and Aston Villa because of their current position, and then occupying the next maybe 35%, and then the other 15% falls to all the rest of the other teams. I would be interested in knowing what's the point of a 15 hours game, just make them 20:00 hours. I mean, no, I think it's intentional to give people who are watching a fair share of, visibility. You watch first half of this one, then first half of the other one. As this one goes into halftime, you retreat back to the other one, which is basically what we do in, oscillating between games. But I understand your concern because Arsenal are good right now, and maybe that's why. I mean, Pedri, that would form part of the reason, but I do not want to believe that it's entirely the reason, because when they are bad, they are always discussed. because they are bad. When they are good, they are always discussed. When they are average, they are always discussed. Like I said, I do not know whether it's me who is focused on the wrong media. But when you go to Sky, when you go to TalkSport, when you go to multiple podcasts, they seem to be the subject of discussion. And I'm not saying they shouldn't be. I'm really not saying they shouldn't be. But particularly, what draws me to this debate tonight is something to do with Viktor Gyokeres. And I understand we all have choices, and to by extension, a certain level of skepticism when certain decisions are made. I completely understand that. So, for example, when Arsenal went out and signed Viktor Gyokeres, I do understand that a lot of people did not agree with the decision. And this is not just about Arsenal fans, the neutrals, the non-neutrals, but from opposing sides of the aisle, looked at the transfer and said, it's not going to work for Arsenal. I understand that debate, that talk, but it also feels like that there is a certain section of people who are desperate to see Viktor Gyokeres fail at Arsenal, so that they derive their satisfaction from that in an I told you kind of some moment, or he would have rather gone to this club, Fulham just survived conceding here, and they're not yet out of danger. Beautiful, beautiful game. So that's the angle within which I want us to look at it, Pedri. You say Arsenal is a funny team. It's a team that will never win the league because they are so bad at finishing the Premier League race when it matters. They are always talked about. Arsenal is controversial. I do not think it's controversial, because controversial means one day you're this and another day you're that. In other words, you find yourself, one day you're making this argument and another day you're making an argument contrary to what maybe you discussed earlier, or when the wind is all blowing in one direction, you seem to tell the world that it is blowing the other direction. So that's controversy. And for me particularly, what draws me to this debate is to understand why. Pedri, you and I will agree that it wouldn't be the first time if a team signed a player and they did not work out for that team. For Barcelona, I may not remember so many, but I can enlist a couple of players who Barcelona signed and particularly did not work out for them the way they would have hoped. Not because those players were bad, but maybe because they came at the wrong moment. Look at players like Alexis Sanchez. I do not think he lived up to his full potential at Barcelona, and not because he was bad. Look at Cesc Fabregas for the 3 years he spent at Barcelona after leaving Arsenal. Look at a player like Malcolm when he joined Barcelona. Look at a player like Adama Traore. Some people forget that Adama Traore had a stint at Barcelona. Look at a player like Alexander Song-Bilong. Is there. When you go to a team like Real Madrid, you're going to find examples of that. I often go back to the signing of Asia Iraramendi. That one did not work out. And there's a whole list of others. So when I drive it back to Arsenal and to the Premier League in this case in particular, yes, over the years, there have been a couple of signings that have not worked out. There's a time Arsenal signed a Park Chu-Yang. There's a time they signed an Andre Santos. They never really worked out. Marouane Chamakh at Arsenal never really worked out. Kim Kalmstrom, although he only arrived on loan, I did not think that was a successful spell. I do not think Yussi Benayoun was a success at Arsenal. Yaya Sanogo, I do not think he was a successful player at Arsenal. Players like Danny Welbeck, I wouldn't consider him very successful in an Arsenal shirt. When you go to teams like Chelsea, when Mo Salah played for them, not that it was his fault, but he wasn't successful at Chelsea. You remember Kevin De Bruyne, you go back to the likes of Claudio Pizarro, you go back to Fernando Torres, and so many others that have come along. When you go to Manchester United, I mean, the list is endless. In other words, it happens with so many teams that a team signs a player and that player does not work out. But the one thing I do not want us to go beyond, the one thing I want us to look at differently is to deviate from LA fans' argument, kind of a sake. So, for example, a LA fan will look at, let's say, a new player over a spell of 10 games and deem that player as a failure or as a failed project. And others will give them the benefit of half a season, others will give them the benefit of an entire season. It depends on the level of understanding of the different fans and their interpretation of the game. Now, Viktor Gyokeres is one Arsenal player that is being overly discussed over the last couple of days. Rightly so and wrongly so. I feel that a lot of people have reduced the debate to his limited number of goals. And let's be honest, he's not scored too many for the Arsenal. I think he scored 2 in the UEFA Champions League. He scored that double against Atletico de Madrid. He scored 4 in the Premier League, 2 against Leeds, 1 against Nottingham Forest, and another against Burnley. So he's not scored against the big sides. And I remember when the season had just started, again, the criticism was he never scores against the big sides. And to his defense, my argument was, I do not think Arsenal have struggled in the past to beat up against the big sides. It's the mid-table teams that they were struggling to beat up against. When we go back to the context of last season, among the teams to which Arsenal dropped points was Fulham in a 2-2 draw. Then they lost points to Everton, home and away, in a goalless draw and a 1-1 draw. They lost points to Brighton and Hove Albion in home and away draws. They lost to Bournemouth, home and away, 2-1 at the Emirates and 2-0 away from home. They lost to West Ham by 1-0. So that's the caliber of teams that they lost points against and, getting beaten, dropping points. So my argument at the time was that it's in those small games that he needs to score to help Arsenal overcome those challenges. And for him having scored against a team like Leeds, against a team like Burnley, a team like Nottingham Forest, for me, I'm okay with that. I'm really okay with that. Pedris goes on to say that you're so lucky you do not spend money to the barber shop. What do you mean I'm so lucky I do not spend money at the barber shop? Every 2 weeks I'm in the barber shop to trim my hair and beard. Personally, I think Gyokeres is the worst player in the Premier League. I hate seeing him play. He can't drive the ball well. Even a 5-year-old Swedish girl can do better than him. He's so overrated. Pedri, I do not know whether that would pass for hate speech. I do not know whether that passes for misjudgment, but I'll take it for the opinion that it is, that you lay out. I couldn't disagree more. Depending on who you compare him to, he's not the best ball carrier, and he's never been that. He's never been a ball carrier. Arsenal signed him knowing that. So it's not a surprise that he's not a ball carrier. He's not a Gabriel Jesus, He's not that type of striker. He's not a Mohamed Salah. He's not an Alexander Isak. He's not an Ekitike kind of striker. He's not that. But, when he joins Arsenal, we talk about a player. Yes, Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang was better. He was a different type of striker still. Again, if you're going to go by numbers, one is going to make the argument Alexander Lacazette was better, So, but the point is, one, and this is context, because, and this is what I tell people, every time you lose context in debate, then you lose the debate. Or if you ignore the context. So he joins Arsenal having not had a preseason. And because Arsenal had suffered injuries to Gabriel Jesus, who was already out, and then Kai Havertz suffers that injury, that knee injury, having come on as a substitute in their 1-0 victory against Manchester United at Old Trafford, it meant one thing, that they predominantly had to rely on Viktor Gyokeres to be the striker. If you and I can agree that Arsenal's blueprint for this season or plan in how to operate with Gyokeres was never meant to be that, and Mikel Arteta kept saying it, that, he's playing a lot of minutes, he did not have preseason, and everything with that, we're trying to manage, but he's the only option we have. And that was the case, So they had to make the hard decision and play him. Now, one would make the argument, why not play Leandro Trossard? Why not play Martinelli, Mikel Merino? Again, you must remember that you do not spend 75 million euros on a player that you are in demand for in terms of need for a striker, and then you're not using them. So, but the point I'm trying to make is that their plan for easing him into the team to sort of cut down on the pressure, because one, coming from Sporting Lisbon to join Arsenal, we'll be honest, is an upgrade by its own measure. We know that the Premier League is miles ahead of the Portuguese league in terms of ranking. Hell, even the Premier League, the English Championship is above the Portuguese Super League, in terms of rankings. Whether you agree with that or disagree with it, it's a statement of fact based on those that rank them. So, with that in context, so he's not had preseason, and then he's he's not had preseason, and then you expect I'm trying to get a feed to a game here. So he's not had preseason, and he's had to start straight away for the Arsenal. Like I said, I don't want to make excuses for him, but you and I will agree that Mikel Arteta's plan on how to use him will have been different in how to go about this. Meanwhile, Manchester City are leading their game by 2-0. We are into the 74th minute of that game. I'm trying to find out who the goal scorer was. It was Savinho, with Tijani Reinders providing the assist in the 67th minute. So that's the update from that game. Manchester City appear to be cruising to the semi-finals, where Chelsea have already reached, having beaten up against Cardiff City by 3-1 yesterday. Alejandro Garnacho picking up a brace in that one. So, before I get to respond to Pedri's comment there, so you have that context that he has not had preseason. Arsenal have had injuries with their strikers, or in Gabriel Jesus, in Kai Havertz, and they've had to play him. Now, because he was piled on a lot, he eventually got an injury, which kept him out for a period of about a month. Now he comes back, and they are starting to ease him in, and that's why they are managing the minutes he's playing. So that's context one. Context two is Arsenal structure play. Arsenal used to playing a certain way. They have not played with a striker, I think, with that outright striker for the last possibly 3 or 4 years. Now, having not played with an outright striker for that amount of period, they learned to play in a certain way. Two, they're not used to playing with a single player as the sort of go-to player in terms of scoring their goals. That's why when you go back to, I think, the 2022-2023 campaign, you had the likes of Martin Odegaard, Gabriel Martinelli, Bukayo Saka scoring more than 10 goals, providing many assists, because it's a whole team sport. When you go back to the season prior to that, you remember Emile Smith-Rowe, you remember, again, Bukayo Saka and the others being the leaders of that team, Martinelli, and yet they were youngsters. Of course, for the 2022-2023 season, that's when Gabriel Jesus joins, that cohort. And we all know that Gabriel Jesus is naturally not the outright, the natural number 9, the mold of Brad Erling Haaland, Harry Kane, or anything like that, So That's something you ought to keep in mind. So, Arsenal played 3.5 or 4 consecutive seasons with that outright number 9. That means they need to adapt to playing with 1 now, because Viktor Gyokeres is that natural number 9. 2, Arsenal have not largely been the team that plays on a transition, and counterattacks. They do it, but it's not their forte. It's not their primary way of playing. Pedri says, Gyokeres is the best player in the Premier League. Gyokeres had an injury, but the best finisher into the Premier League. He's very talented. I would say 75 million euros is a cheap price for him. I don't know why you're changing now. Who is a better player? Dugare or Walter Pandiani? I would go with Dugare. That is Russ. If Chelsea, Manchester City, Newcastle qualify for the semi-finals of the Carabao Cup, who is the 4th team? The 4th team, I would hope it would be Arsenal, because Arsenal play next week against Crystal Palace. That's the 4th quarterfinal setup. So that game is going to come next week. And the reason for that is because Crystal Palace play in the UEFA Conference League. So they have a game this week on Thursday. Arsenal would have loved to have played that game yesterday, which was Tuesday, but that game had to be moved to next week because of that engagement. So, yeah. So back to the Gyokeres conversation. So you have these wingers, you have these attacking midfielders that are not accustomed to playing with that kind of number 9. And even when they brought them a striker, remember when at the start of the 2023-2024 campaign, when Mikel Arteta signed Kai Havertz, he said they were signing a midfielder. Now, when things weren't clicking in midfield because of the gaps at the tip of the attack, they started to play him as a striker, where he played fairly okay. Of course, last season, I think he was on course on possibly being the first Arsenal player to possibly get 20 Premier League goals ever since Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang. But then, in late January, he suffered that hamstring during their training camp in Dubai and was out for the next 3 months or so. Even when he came back at the tail end of the season, he did not play much. And then he's had a recurring sort of a knee injury at the very start of this season. So he's been absent. Now, these players that are not accustomed to playing with that outright number 9 are the same players that that we do expect to adjust to playing with 1. So it's not going to come easy. It's not the case of let's say shifting a center back to play right back or left back. It's not the case of shifting a number 8 to play as a number 6 or vice versa. It's not that simple, in other words. So there are a few adjustments that Arsenal need to make. And part of those adjustments are, 1, is releasing the ball quicker to him when he makes the runs. But do you know why they do not release the ball quicker to him? Because they are not accustomed to playing that way. They are accustomed to passing the ball around, knock it around, attract the opponent. Now, at the start of the season, there's something they were doing, and this was again to try and help Viktor Gyokeres. They would draw teams in and then play the long ball, in the channels. We saw a lot of that. Now, in the last phase of the season, they seem to have abandoned that. They've not done it very many times. I think the last game where they did it a lot of times was in the game 3-1 victory against Bayern Munich. And that was because they knew that Bayern Munich were really, really good with their press. They had seen that in the first half. So they decided to go long, They would try attract Bayern Munich a little bit and then go long, So they seem to have not stayed with that kind of style for long. And that's also a factor. So, in other words, you're playing with these attacking midfielders and wingers that are not tailor-made to play to that kind of striker. And I'm not saying you can't change them, but are not accustomed to it and are struggling. That's why, for me, the argument is simple. If Viktor Gyokeres was missing hundreds of chances or tens of chances, then we would say he's a bad player. But how many chances does he miss in a game? Not very many. Now, I've seen people again criticize him for failing to make necessary runs in certain areas, to dash onto a cross, particularly for the game against Aston Villa, and I think on about 2 occasions in the game, in the 2-1 victory against Wolverhampton Wanderers. Guess what? My defense for him is simple. They are not constantly treating him to that, So on the few occasions that they do it is then when they suddenly expect him to be there. But when he's often there, then they are not making that kind of play. You know how it's a bit of a hide and seek kind of game. That when you go this side, I go that side. When I go that side, you go that side. But then suddenly, if I go this side twice, I'm being forced to expect that you should be there. No, So Arsenal players need to consistently do that and tell him, look, we're going to be whipping in the balls. Be in and around that area, because he is that kind of striker that stays there. Otherwise, if you want him to change his game to be a striker that pulls back, he's not going to offer you that. His quality on the ball, in terms of hold-up play overall, is not as good as that of Harry Kane, who does that kind of play for Bayern Munich. He's not a Kai Havertz. He's not a Gabriel Jesus. So he's not going to drag himself into midfield, try and collect that ball, hold onto it, or carry it forward and hope that other players are quickly going to come in for an interplay. We do not get to see that often because he's not that kind of a player. He's a Brad Erling Haaland kind of player. When Manchester City signed Brad Erling Haaland, a lot of people thought he was not going to thrive because of the way Manchester City play. But you know what Manchester City chose to do? They adapted their play to the target man they got. We know that Pep Guardiola ordinarily was not the kind of manager that was accustomed to playing with those outright number 9s. He preferred a Messi kind of player, a false 9. That's why he signed a player like Gabriel Jesus. Now, of course, he managed Robert Lewandowski, but again, I wouldn't want to compare Lewandowski to Viktor Gyokeres. It wouldn't be an honest debate. But he's the kind of manager whose ingenuity can make things happen for a player if he knows this is the player I'm going to play my game around. What Manchester City do present day is narrow the pitch. Oftentimes they avoid overly spreading it. They narrow it down. Why? Because their target man is through the spine of that midfield. He does not run wide, He does not run through the wide spaces. He's always centrally. Rarely does he go wide. Now, in Viktor Gyokeres, you have a player who likes to run in spaces wide and then cut inside. Again, the ball is not getting to him quick enough. In the recent couple of days, there's been a video that has been overly trended. And I do not remember against which opponent, but Martin Odegaard gets past the ball and he's carrying the ball forward. And Viktor Gyokeres makes the run into space. He does not give him the ball. Because he's running alongside the defender, he darts into a different position to create himself space. And still Martin Odegaard does not play him the ball. And I think eventually plays it to, was it Gabriel Martinelli or somebody at the wing? That, although does not sum it up all, is a typical example of the kind of play that he's having to deal with. So Pedro says, I think Gabriel Magalhaes is one of the worst center backs in the Premier League. He doesn't tackle enough and he's bad in headers. He doesn't know how to pass, and even Gabriel Jesus can do better. Do you agree? One, I do not agree with your assessment of Gabriel Magalhaes. I do not know if you've watched enough of Gabriel Magalhaes to draw to those conclusions. But one, he's a leader in that backline. Two, the idea that he doesn't hit the ball enough is wrong. Watch Arsenal closely when they're defending set pieces. And when they go in the reverse direction, he's Arsenal's biggest threat when it comes to set pieces. So I do not agree with that assessment. Two, when it comes to when you say he doesn't know how to pass the ball, I certainly do not agree with that as well. When you go to Gabriel Jesus and say Gabriel Jesus, you say he doesn't know how to pass, and even Gabriel Jesus can do better. When you say Gabriel Jesus can do better in terms of what? I, for one, I think he should be scoring more goals and perhaps providing more assists. But oftentimes he's hard done by his own nature of play. But more critically is he's oftentimes too injured. I mean, you can't come back from injury, play 2, 3, 4 games. You're trying to find your foot back from injury, and then you get injured again and expect to have, to build on, to be consistent. It doesn't happen that way. It can't happen for him because, I mean, if you want to give a fair assessment of, let's say, Gabriel Jesus, what majority of Arsenal fans or podcasts, when they speak about Gabriel Jesus, oftentimes they're going to make reference to the first 6 months when he was at the club. That's for the 2022-2023 campaign. You know why? That's when he was consistently available, But over the last 2 seasons, this inclusive, he's been in and out of the team. I think last season he made about 17 appearances. And I would bet he started not more than 11 games. Why? Because he was injured. So that's just, I think across all competitions, he may have played like 23 games and maybe 17 in the Premier League, but majority of those coming off the bench. So we know that when a player is coming back from injury, their fitness levels are not at the best. And sometimes, depending on which player, but sometimes it takes them a bit of time to find their footing. That's why part of the reason as why Arsenal struggled last season. When the likes of Martin Odegaard returned from injury, he struggled to find his footing, when he returned from that ankle injury. So I do not agree. So for Gabriel Jesus, I would say, yes, he needs to score more goals, but he's too injury prone. I do not think I've seen Gabriel Jesus play for the Arsenal for 10 consecutive games. Like, starting a game in, game out. Why? Because he's injured. You have to go back to that first campaign. You say, yes, but modern strikers are required to carry the ball forward and build link-ups, play, and become a playmaker and a striker like Harry Kane, similar to Julian Alvarez, as well as Hugo Ekitike and Matthias Cunha. Again, all the players you described are different from the player we are discussing. I've given you the example of Brad Erling Haaland. He will use his strength to get the better of defenders in a bit of hold-up play, pretty much the same way Gyokeres does. But beyond that, he's not the kind of player that is going to dribble past 1-2 players and then, create a sublime moment for another running teammate. It often doesn't happen that way. How many assists does Brad Erling Haaland wrap up the season with? Do you know why there are not many? It's because he is not that kind of a player. He's not that kind of player. Last season, he scored 22 Premier League goals. He had only 3 assists. Only 3. The season prior to that, when he scored 27 goals, he had 5 assists. Compare that to Mohamed Salah. Why? Because they are 2 different players. Their style is different. This season, he scored 17 goals in the Premier League alone, but he only has 1 assist. Why is his assist contribution that low? Why? Because he's not that type of player that is going to do the hold-up play, wait for his teammates, or even do the turn and find maybe Bernardo Silva making the run, or Jeremy Doku, or Savinho, or Omar Mamouche and play them in, or Ryan Chucky or Phil Foden. No, When he receives the ball and he does the whole that play, it's to knock it back for him to run in the next chunk of space for him to be found to score the goal. And Manchester City know that. So they play to that strength, you know. So that's the context I would want to put to that. Then you say, okay, I think Bukayo Saka is one of the worst right wingers. He doesn't dribble enough. He only crosses the ball every time. He isn't visually pleasing like Lamine Yamal. Do you agree? Again, does he dribble maybe as well as Lamine Yamal? No. And by the way, the thing about Bukayo Saka, I think it comes with maturity. And this reminds me of the conversation that Manchester United players had with Cristiano Ronaldo. You know, they told him, you remember when he had just joined from Sporting Lisbon, you know, he had the stepovers, the what. As he grew into his career at Manchester United, they told him, we don't need that. That's not what we want. Get to the byline, cross the ball, get in front of goal, shoot at goal, you know. So for Bukayo Saka, it's not about how many players he dribbles past. It's how he assists the team and how many goals he scores at the end of the day. You know, he's matured from that point of where it's pleasure to him to have dribbled past, you know, 2-3 defenders. He's gone beyond that. Really, Lamine Yamal is still in that phase of, you know, it's exciting when he dribbles past players. You know, it's exciting when he does his trickery here and there. You know, so that's the difference I want to make. So when it comes to crossing the ball, in the game against Chelsea, I'm one of those that criticize him for his wrong decision making because he focused so much on shooting for himself that he ignored the playing options or the contribution he would have made for the team as opposed to making it about himself. Meanwhile, the game between Manchester City and Brentford has just ended in a 2-0 victory for Manchester City. Like I said, Ryan Cherki and Savinho, they are on the score sheet for Man City as they advance to the semi-finals of the EFL Cup. Remember, at the semi-final stage, the games will be played home and away. So the dates for that will be communicated, I think, once the draw is done for the semi-finals. But it will be a home and away. Last season, Arsenal made it to the semi-finals. They got beat by Newcastle by 2-0 in both fixtures, home and away, before being knocked out. Liverpool, who did Liverpool knock out? Oh, I struggle to remember. But the final was between Newcastle and Liverpool, and Newcastle got the better of them. So you say, I think Declan Rice is overhyped and overrated, and he only scored against Real Madrid, and everyone started saying he is so good. I think he's okay, but I think Ter Stegen can do better. Do not forget, Declan Rice's role in that team. Okay, yeah. Thanks for the reminder. Liverpool knocked out Tottenham. I do not think Declan Rice again. He for his goals against Real Madrid. Those are what we call outliers. You know, a moment of brilliancy, a moment of magic, a moment that you never dream of. It's just what it was. He's not the highly goal-scoring midfielder that, the likes of Frank Lampard. I'm not sure he's hit the numbers that Steven Gerrard managed to hit. He's not he's not a Cesc Fabregas. He's not that. I think, Pedro, you should just summarize it to say I think every Arsenal player is bad, because that seems to be your argument tonight on every player. So again, give it the objective lens that it needs to have, and then you'll have a fair debate. Unfortunately, we cannot discuss every Arsenal player one by one, to their strengths and weaknesses. And I'm not saying they are all perfect. I'm not saying they are all world-class players. They are very good players. but not all of them are world-class players. If that's the kind of argument that you'd wish to have, it's just what it is, in that particular case. So, for example, just to take you back a little bit on your debate on Bukayo Saka, look at Rafinha and Lamine Yamal. Rafinha knows that it's not now about him, having the joy of dribbling past players. It's about how effective he is. That's why as soon as he gets in front of goal, he's thinking, I must be shooting, and if there's a player I should provide an assist for, I should be providing the assist, because he's at that level of maturity, whereas for Lamine Yamal, sometimes unnecessarily, he will want to dribble past another player before he takes an aim at goal. So because for him, it's still pleasurable to have, dribbled past, a couple of players here and there. Now, I'm joking. Every Arsenal player is good right now. I'm just messing. Okay, so anyways, it is what it is. The game between Newcastle and Fulham is still a 1-1 apiece. We are into the 54th minute of the second half. Fulham looked okay. Thought they looked really good in the first half, and that goal by Yohan Wissa came against the run of play. But yeah. Oh, okay. Anyways, tomorrow, like I said, do not forget, action is going to come underway in the UEFA Conference League. For those of you that may be interested in catching that action, do you want $1,000? That's the second time you've asked me that question in a space of 2 weeks. I've already given you my opinion on that. It's not changed, Pedri. Okay, Real Madrid are leading by 2-0 against Talavera de la Reina. There in the Copa de la Rey, Kylian Mbappe scored from the penalty spot and an own goal by Farendo at the goals, giving Real Madrid, the lead in that one. Meanwhile, Real Madrid have a very strong starting 11. Andre Lunin, David Jimenez, Dinhausen, Alvaro Fernandez, Carreras, Fran Garcia at left back. Carreras is playing as one of the centre backs. Adagula, Dani Ceballos, Franco Mastatuano in midfield. Jesus Christ, what kind of midfield is that? Enrique, Gonzalo Garcia, and Kylian Mbappe. I mean, that's a pretty strong team, That's a pretty strong team for Real Madrid to have. A pretty strong team to have there for Real Madrid. Anyways, okay. So yeah, I think. By the way, yes. Just to wrap up the Gyokeres debate, is that I'm a bit surprised that players like Alexander Isak, players like Florian Wirtz, who they themselves are yet to live to their own expectations, are not discussed as much as Viktor Gyokeres is discussed. So for me, that's what begs the question, really. To say, and we're talking about, for example, Alexander Isak cost twice the price, Gyokeres cost, and Florian Wirtz almost, around the same ballpark. And we're not having those kinds of debates, or those kinds of debates are not largely being had about them. It's almost that when sometimes when they're discussing, for example, Liverpool, it's almost easy to forget that even Alexander Isak is part of that team. We're talking about a guy who has 2 goals, one against Southampton in the EFL Cup and another against West Ham in the Premier League. Florian Wirtz, 0 goals, 0 assists. The only goal he thought he had scored, which was against Sunderland, was given as an own goal. So he still does not have the numbers. And we're talking about £100 million player. So that's why I feel I question. I ask, what's the obsession with Viktor Gyokeres? You know, he's not like he's the only player that is yet to live to their expectations in as far as summer signings go. Look at Benjamin Sesko. He's a young player. He's a project in progress. But as good as they were, I think one, Isak did not need any adaptability to the Premier League. He only needed to adapt to, the way Liverpool play. Hugo Ekitike seems to be like the only player who has gelled in quickly. Pedri, I understand completely about your last comment. I understand completely about that one. I will get back to the other comment in just a bit. But I just wanted to wrap up that debate. Then also, the other disadvantage that Viktor Gyokeres finds himself with is Arsenal play. Almost every team that is playing against Arsenal is playing with a low block. And that means there's limited space for him to run in behind. You come against teams that play with literally a back five against Arsenal. Again, that limits the space. To a certain extent, even Liverpool have had to play against some of these teams or teams that play in that kind of fashion. When we wrapped up, when we were discussing the aftermath of their win against Wolves on Saturday, which was a very poor performance, we made comparisons and I said, look at how they featured against Manchester United, how Wolves set up. They were very open because they thought they could have a go at Manchester United and get a result. In the first half, they looked okay. It finished 1-1. In the second half, they got obliterated. Had they come with the same setup against Arsenal, we would be having a totally different conversation. So teams are playing with the low block against Arsenal. And that is also another factor, among all the other things that Arsenal, they themselves need to readjust. So I think that's another issue. One of the things I appreciate about the Spanish La Liga is that it's very rare to find a team, even a bottom team, playing the way Wolves set up against Arsenal. They all sort of seem confident in playing in a manner that opens the game, as in it's a passing game. Sometimes the tempo is high, but on a larger basis, the tempo is often a bit lower, So I think that's the one thing I appreciate about them. But in the Premier League, teams come and say, yeah, we are up. And by the way, I used to ask myself this question. Why would Arsenal, let's say, struggle to score against Burnley, and then you find on another day, Fulham is scoring 3 past Burnley? You find you're struggling to score more than 2 goals against West Ham, and the subsequent week, they're going to get hammered 4. You struggle to score against Everton, and Newcastle go away to the Hill Dixon Stadium and hammer them 4-1. Why? Because the way they set up against those teams or their peer teams is different from the way they set up against some of these big teams. So, and Arsenal often, this season particularly, being the team to beat, are often being that kind of team. So Pedri says, I would say I would sit in silence, do nothing, stare at a white wall for 24 hours straight, block internet for 24 hours instead of watching a conference league game. It's so boring. Jesus Christ. To be fair, or to be honest, I've not watched any UEFA Conference League game this season. Last season, I think I tried to watch a couple of Chelsea games, because usually those fixtures are played at the same time with Europa League fixtures. I've watched a couple of Europa League fixtures. I've watched the game between Aston Villa and FC Basel. They did not look pretty. I think, and a few other games in the UEFA Europa League. Did you see the Jose Badala's news about him coming to Crystal Palace after Glasner? Yes. He plays Haram ball, where he plays a 6-3-1 were 6 defenders. It's so bad. We barely beat Getafe all the time. No, no battles. I mean, I think, yeah, I think he's the only manager who is been criticized, particularly in La Liga. Like I said, it's not many teams in La Liga that would set it up that way. But yeah, I've seen the reports that Oliver Glasner will not be renewing his contract with Crystal Palace. Apparently, he's eyeing the Manchester United job. There have been reports or rumors. I do not know to what extent I should they are true that Manchester United seem to, or some people in the Man United hierarchy seem to have to come to a conclusion that Ruben Amorim may not be the man, the right guy for the job. So they are thinking he has the rest of this season, see out the season, and they part ways with him and then bring in Oliver Glasner. Those rumors are being floated around. But to go back to Mr. Tribe, do you want a fun fact? Please go ahead and give it. Give us the fun fact. So if they were to go back to, so for example, and by the way, Oliver Glasner, given to how he's managed Crystal Palace really, really well, I do not think he would struggle to find a new job. Especially, I think he would want to go to a team that has better resources than Crystal Palace have at the moment, if we are being honest. So, and the Manchester United job would be really, really enticing to him. One, he's already playing the kind of style that Ruben Amorim is playing, only that he is more effective with it than Amorim is. Two, the other thing is that United have the resources, whether they are good, whether they are bad, they have the resources. They have the sort of legroom to go out in the markets and sign some brilliant players, you know. And let's not forget, he's also made some certain players better. Players like Ebeleche Eze, players like Jean-Philippe Mateta. Until Oliver Glasner came to Crystal Palace, many people did not know that he had been already at Crystal Palace for about, almost 3 years, you know, because at the time they were reliant. They had a Benteke back there. Back then they had an Hudson Eduardo, and that kind of thing, really. So he's capable of improving players. Oh, Jesus Christ. Wasn't that an on goal, though? Newcastle had scored, and it has been ruled out for an offside. Allow me to review this moment as I wait for Pedri's fun fact. Uh, Oh, Joachim Anderson had scored an own goal, but the goal was ruled out for offside because the cross is by Jacob Murphy. He made that one from an offside position. So it remains 1-1 at the time. So, yeah, I've had the reports of Jose Badolas possibly coming in at Crystal Palace to take over the reins. And I've already seen some Premier League fans looking worried, saying he plays haram football. How are they going to score against him? I mean, where there is a will, there is a way. You know, even when you play with 10 players behind the ball, if you are to get beat, you will get beat eventually. I don't care how, but somehow you will get beat. So it does happen. It does happen, you know. Um, even when you play that kind of conservative football, you will get beat. You will get beat. So, oh Jesus Christ, really? Oh, I was just realizing that on Saturday, 8 Premier League games will be played, and only 2 on Sunday. So when you look at Getafe, they are 10th on the Premier League log. You know, they played 16 games. They've won 6, they've drawn 2, and they've lost 8. So that means even with their 6-man defense, they still lose games. They still lose games. How was that not a foul? The referee must have been kidding, right? Unfortunately, there's no video assistant referee at this stage in the competition of the EFL Cup. So teams get away with a lot. Otherwise, guys, allow me to wrap it here. It's been a wonderful discussion tonight for the last 1 hour and coming on to 6 minutes. So thank you so much, Pedri. Thank you so much, Natasha. Thank you so much, Jay, for having been part of tonight's podcast. I wish you a wonderful rest of the night. Stay blessed. And I'll see you guys next time. Tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Hopefully, I'll be earlier than today. And because actually, I have to be early because I have to run somewhere after that podcast, as even pondering whether it will be ideal to postpone the podcast, but we'll have to do it just quickly. It may be short, but we'll do it and then, and move on. So good night.